This isn't just an office. It's one of the most ambitious buildings ever designed. Every curve, every detail has a reason, and the genius is hiding in plain sight.
This footage shows the last public appearance of Steve Jobs, 4 months before his death. He speaks to the Cupertino City Council to reveal one final project.
Apple's growing like a weed, and as you know, we've always been in Cupertino. Started in a little office park and eventually got the buildings we are in now at the corner of Deanza and 280.
The previous so-called Apple campus was no longer big enough for the growing company. The buildings, constructed in 1993, are arranged along a circular private road, Infinite Loop, named after a programming term for a code that will run endlessly by itself. In order to cope with the growing number of employees, the company started acquiring more and more buildings in the area. Eventually, Apple was operating out of a chaotic mix of buildings that were originally developed entirely separately from one another and are by no means ideal for a coherent office headquarters.
So we're renting buildings, not very good buildings either, at an ever greater radius from our campus. And it's clear that we need to build a new campus.
The plan was not to abandon the existing campus at Infinite Loop, but to expand it with a larger, modern one. Apple was able to acquire a large piece of land that is not only located nearby, but also sits directly on Interstate 280, which runs through the entire Silicon Valley, offering good accessibility for employees. A large part of this area was for sale because the computer company Hewlett-Packard closed their offices here, and Steve Jobs personally came full circle by acquiring this site, as it was somewhat personal to him.
When I was 13, I think, I called up Hewlett-Packard were my idols, and I called up Bill Hewlett because he lived in Palo Alto, and he picked up the phone, and I talked to him, and I asked him if he'd give me some spare parts for something I was building called a frequency counter. And he did, but in addition to that, he gave me something way more important. He gave me a job that summer, a summer job at Hewlett-Packard right here in Santa Clara off 280, the division that built frequency counters. And I was in heaven. Well, right around that exact moment in time, Hewlett and Packard themselves were walking on some property over here in Cupertino, in Prune Ridge, and they ended up buying it. And they built their computer systems division there. And as Hewlett-Packard has been shrinking lately, they decided to sell that property, and we bought it.
Apple hired the design studio Foster & Partners by British architect Norman Foster, one of the most influential contemporary architects in the world. Foster's career initially took off in the 1970s when he made his name by creating machine-influenced buildings that borrowed industrial design elements for a modernist look. Over the decades, his style has evolved, and his newer buildings feature less harsh elements but an evolving modern aesthetic. His buildings display a functional modernity, a good fit as his design approach is akin to Apple's own product philosophy. In designing the new Apple campus, Foster worked closely with Steve Jobs, who had a very personal vision for the project, and Johnny Ive, then Apple's chief design officer, who, having worked at Apple since the late 90s, was about as renowned in the field of product design as Foster was in the field of architecture. It was the beginning of a special partnership of exceptional talents.
We've seen these office parks with lots of buildings, and they get pretty boring pretty fast. So we'd like to do something better than that. And the campus we'd like to build there is one building that holds 12,000 people.
final complex is called Apple Park, and it is characterized by its centerpiece, a single ring-shaped building surrounded by vast parkland. And while the campus itself is the result of a unique collaboration, the building is designed to enable exactly these types of collaborations. The parks should invite employees who may work in completely different parts of the building to cross paths and exchange ideas. The circular building is divided into 9 sections, each connected by a light-filled atrium. And although the building as a whole offers an enormous amount of space, due to the ring shape, it is not overwhelmingly large at any individual point. Within the individual segments, walkways lead around the building along the outer and inner rims. These walkways are separated from the outside only by a continuous wall made of glass that stretches from the floor to the ceiling, allowing a panoramic view of the surroundings. Apple claims that these are the largest curved glass panels used in any building to date. And sticking out from the facade are white canopies, positioned to cast shade at the interior hallways. In addition, these elements are also part of the building's active ventilation system, bringing fresh air in from the outside. The office space is also kept very open, with glass walls laying out an open pot design. In this concept, the employees are given access to a large open floor plan where they can self-locate to available desks. This layout should increase collaboration and is inspired by co-working spaces and college campuses. But this vision of a modern working environment clashes with reality in many places. There are reports that some of Apple's employees dislike the open pod concept, with programmers struggling to concentrate in this new setup. Another place where employees come together is the central cafeteria. It is a single lunchroom for the entire building. The light-filled space that rises from the floor to the roof, offering a massive open room, is intended as yet another meeting space. And along the outer wall, there are 2 giant glass doors that can be opened to allow the interior of the building to flow seamlessly into the exterior landscape. When it came to the design of the parks, it was important to Steve Jobs that the landscape is a reflection of the California landscape he grew up around. The new campus is not only close to the previous campus, but also not far from where everything started for Jobs. His childhood home, where he assembled the first Apple computers together with Steve Wozniak in 1976. More than 30 years later, in addition to the immense global influence the company has exerted, Apple has also become a fundamental part of the local environment in which Steve Jobs grew up. Not only as one of the largest tenants in the area and as a large employer, but also as the city's biggest taxpayer. The company that once started in a garage here had transformed the entire neighborhood. The parks at the new campus therefore had to celebrate the local environment, and Steve Jobs wanted them to be based on nearby Stanford University. Jobs appreciated the park layout here, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who is considered the founder of American landscape architecture. Steve Jobs also appreciated the extensive hiking trails that surrounded the Stanford dish, right behind the university. For the design of the parks, reclaimed landscape architect Laurie Allen was hired, who relocated to Palo Alto for 4 months in order to get a real feel for the local environment. His park design is a representation of the California landscape. On one hand, there is a wide meadow extending from the building, which can be used for events and resembles campus parkland at Stanford University.
Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding out that your bank might not have enough money to give you your savings. Not because the bank was robbed, not because the economy collapsed, but because everyone else had the same fear at the same time. People start lining up outside banks, investors panic, stock prices plunge, companies can't borrow money, and suddenly an entire economy begins to freeze. Today, governments have central banks that step in during moments like this. But in 1907, America had a very unusual backup plan. One man, a 70-year-old banker. No government rescue team, no Federal Reserve. Just one individual sitting in a library in New York City, deciding which institutions would survive and which would die. His name was J.P. Morgan, and whether you see him as a hero, a monopolist, or something in between, there was a moment when the stability of the American economy depended largely on him. The strange part? That situation helped create the financial system we still live under today. To understand why, we need to go back to an America that looked powerful on the surface, but was much more fragile underneath. By the early 1900s, the United States was becoming an industrial giant. Railroads stretched across the continent. Factories produced steel at enormous scale. Oil, coal, and manufacturing were transforming the country. American wealth was exploding. But there was a problem. The financial system was held together with what was essentially economic duct tape. Modern viewers often assume central banks have always existed. Not in America. The Federal Reserve wouldn't arrive until 1913. Before that, when financial panic hit, there was no official institution responsible for saving the banking system. If enough people demanded their money at once, banks simply had to figure it out, or fail. And failures were common. America experienced repeated banking panics throughout the 1800s. Every few years, some shock would spread fear through the financial system. Money would disappear. Credit would dry up. Businesses would collapse. The economy would stumble. The system worked surprisingly well during good times and surprisingly badly during bad times.